Welcome back, everybody. Today on our story, Maxwell and Dad, I'd like to continue our discussion on the subject of medical care coordination. I hope you enjoyed last week's episode. On the previous episode, I discussed the importance of choosing a pediatrician. I discussed early intervention services in your local community, and I discussed the benefits of having a care coordinator. Well, today I like to discuss something super important. I mean, it's that important. Something that I've touched on enough other episodes, and even in my interview with Dr. Bowles, but I haven't spent a lot of time on. This something is, in my opinion, the most important thing that a family can have. The most important thing that a family can have when caring for their differently able child. You know what I'm talking about? Does anyone know what I'm talking about? All right, I'm gonna let the cat out the bag. I'm talking about Medicaid. Listen to me, parent. Listen to me, father. Listen to me, mother. If you don't have Medicaid for your child, you are literally committing financial suicide. Unless money just isn't an issue for you and your family. Because for the average family, there's no way, no how that an average family can't afford the cost of doctor visits, medication, equipment, food, supplies, hospitalizations, treatments, therapies, nurses, so on and so forth. Like it's just way too expensive. I remember just when Maxwell was first born and the hospital bills that came, and again, we had commercial insurance, so thankfully that offset some costs. But literally, we're in the double digits of thousands of dollars. It was just astronomical. So I thank God for Medicaid. Quick story. When his mother and I transitioned from Virginia to Maryland, we got an apartment in Maryland. We were going to live in Maryland. And I remember even beforehand, we were doing our own research, looking at different blogs and stuff, different groups that we we're part of on Facebook or so on and so forth, looking to see in terms of what kind of waivers they had in the state of Maryland. And finally, in doing my research, I think I emailed the people. I found out, and again, like I said in previous episodes, this information just doesn't fall in your lap. I wish that people were so free and just so not frugal, excuse, that's the wrong word. So free, so liberal with this information, but it's just not the case. Right? You got to do your own research. You got to do your own giving. You have to know somebody who knows somebody who knows somebody. Like it's just not out there. So nonetheless, when I finally found out about this waiver that Maxwell could be under in the state of Maryland, I found out it was a year-long waiting list, a year long. And so I remember going to his mother and I was like, hey, in order for Maxwell to get Medicaid instead of Maryland, we got to apply, and it takes a year to even make it, through the process. So I said, I don't think we even have the conversation. And I was like, look, somebody got to live in Virginia because we already have Medicaid in Virginia, because there's no way that we can work both of our jobs, have him get the services and things that he needs, and not have Medicaid, because it'd just would be way too much money. And I refused to go back to all those hospital bills. So I said, somebody has to live in Virginia. I was pastoring in Baltimore. Well, I am pastoring in Baltimore, and she was working in Montgomery County. And she's like, all right, well, I'll look for a place in Virginia. And she found a spot in Virginia, and that's what we did. And we were able to continue on with Medicaid in Virginia, because he's already on Medicaid in Virginia. It was just now changing from where he was in the Hampton Roads area to now Fairfax County. So it was simple, somewhat simple. It was still some coordination that had to take place, but it wasn't no year-long waiting list. So that's that. So again, it's just too much for the average citizen. So to solve this problem, right, States have special waivers, as I just mentioned, special waivers that allows families who exceed the financial threshold to still get support from the state. What do I mean, right? And again, I haven't done a deep dive and research, but taking some families who may fall under the financial threshold, they may be eligible for Medicaid assistance or for whatever the case may be for the insurance. However, if you make too much money, you normally wouldn't be able to qualify for Medicaid. And so, because his mother and I make too much money, they have special waivers that support families in those situations. So in the state of Maryland, the program that Maxwell is under is called the Model Waiver Program. In Virginia, I think it was the ECDC waiver or something like that, or CCC waiver. I forget. But in the state of Maryland, it's the Model Waiver Program, MODEL, Model Waiver Program. Now, unlike when Maxwell was in Virginia, it took him about 2 to 3 months to get Medicaid through the waiver in Virginia. But in Maryland, the process takes about a year. Yeah, about a year. So Maxwell came to live with me last year, the end of July, the last week of July 2023. But I started the process of the model waiver back in April of 2022. April. So it took about 15 months for the whole thing to go through. Now, it was in last August or September that I got informed that his application was good to go and his application got approved and he was put on the waiting list. So it took about, I guess, 4 to 5 months for his application to be approved and for all the documentation to go through, and I guess for them to do their due diligence and making sure everything was good to go. So I remember, again, it was about late August, September, getting a notification that he was approved, his application was good to go, and now he was on the waiting list. And they told him he's on the waiting list. He's at spot number 10, and patients usually move up about 1 to 2 spots a month. And so they were just saying, hey, continue to check in to see where he's at, so we can kind of so you can be prepared to start getting other stuff, paperwork done. And one thing we had to do is we had to seamlessly try to in his insurance, his Medicaid insurance in Virginia, and then started in Maryland. And so you can't carry 2 Medicaid insurances. So he couldn't have Medicaid in Virginia and then get on Maryland. So we had to end of Virginia first and get on Maryland. So they were like, check in so we can give you heads up so you can try to end of Virginia. And so he won't be without for too long and then start in Maryland next month. And so it was a whole lot, again, this coordination going on. Nonetheless, it took Maxwell about 11 months to move up 10 spots. Again, I got the notification 2022, August or September. He didn't move up until August of 2023. So it took him about 11 months, about 11 months. And I believe from my research, there are about 200 spots available for the model waiver. So again, it took about 15 months for everything to be finalized. Now, what's key is, and what's important, perhaps you're a parent, you're wondering like, wow, does my child qualify for a waiver? Again, I don't know every state. I'm sure Delaware or New York or California, Florida, they might have different, qualifications, different things. But what qualifies one to be eligible for the model waiver in the state of Maryland? For one, it allows the child has to be medically fragile. And so from the website, it allows medically fragile individuals who will otherwise be hospitalized and or certified as needing either hospital or nursing facility level of care to receive medical necessary and appropriate services in the community. What does that mean? Basically, in order to qualify for the model waiver or some kind of medical waiver, what has to happen is that your child has to have such a severe disability, or as they say, medically has to be a medically fragile individual, that if the parent or a guardian was not willing to take care of them, they otherwise would be in a hospital or some kind of nursing home receiving care. And so Maxwell's needs are so grave that if his parents were not loving and were not willing to take care of him, he couldn't be in like an ordinary foster care or some kind of facility. He would have to be either in a hospital or a nursing facility. So what the model waiver does it allows the families to receive assistance, to receive care, and keep the person in their home. That's what allows. That's what allows. As a result, the model waiver clients can continue to live at home with their families. That's what allows one to do. So, yeah. Again, in the state of Maryland, to be eligible for the model waiver, several conditions must be met. These conditions are, and again, it may vary in different states, but I'm going to go through the qualifications in the state of Maryland, and I'm sure that there's some parallels in your state, wherever you're watching from. So admission must be completed before the individual becomes 22 years of age. The individual must meet the definition of a disabled child at the time of application for model waiver services is made. The term disabled child means, and I quote, a chronically ill or severely impaired child younger than 22 years old whose illness or disability may not require 24-hour inpatient care, but which, in the absence of home care services, may precipitate admission to or prolonged stay in a hospital, nursing facility, or long-term care facility. Again, right? For individuals who, without being in their home with their family, they otherwise would be in some kind of facility receiving care. All right. Next, the individual must be certified as in need of a hospital or nursing facility level of care. The level of care is determined by a state contracted reviewer using information supplied by the referring physician. The individual's medical, necessary, and appropriate community-based medical services must be cost neutral. What does cost neutral mean? That is, the cost of the community-based services must not exceed the cost of institutional care. So it has to be cheaper than it would cost if Maxwell was just in a hospital somewhere, right? Receiving around-the-clock care, or in a hospital somewhere, or in a nursing facility. So it has to be cheaper than that. All right? So if you're wondering where to go to, if you're in the state of Maryland, I just Googled the coordinating center. So my whole application process, and even now his case manager, is through the coordinating center in the state of Maryland. I believe they have an office, like a Baltimore location, and I think like a location somewhere else. Now, the application was pretty straightforward. It asks a lot of questions, but it's a pretty straightforward application. They ask, where do you live? Again, because the person has to live in the state of Maryland. They ask, where do you live? Does your child have a pediatrician? Who's your child's doctor? Does your child have specialty physicians? Who's your child's specialist? What are the child's current medical needs? And so I had to go through, Maxwell having a G-tube, and Maxwell having oxygen, and Maxwell needing breathing treatment, and Maxwell needing having epilepsy. So, it asks all those things. What your child's current medical needs. What services is your child already receiving through either early intervention? Remember, I talked about early intervention the last episode, or school-based. And so does your child have an IEP? What kind of services is your child receiving through his school based on the IEP? Do you have insurance? You have to provide your insurance information. Do you have proof of employment? Do you work? And I'm going to get to why they asked that question in a minute. They asked for a work verification letter as well. They asked for a letter of medical necessity. Again, the doctor has, his pediatrician has to write a letter saying that the child's condition, the child's disability necessitates the need for additional care, for additional services. So the reason why they need a work verification letter, to my knowledge, and I might be missing some things, but to my knowledge, it's because part of the things that Medicaid pays for is private duty nursing hours. And so when they provide the client or the child with private duty nursing hours, one of the things they do to gauge how many hours you qualify for, how many hours you need, is they want to know what your work schedule is. And the state of Maryland, I'm not gonna lie, I've been blessed. I've been super blessed. But what the state of Maryland does, they look at how much commute time you have to and from work, and they look at your work schedule and what days you work. And so from there, they do whatever they do to try to gauge how many hours that each family would need. Um, and so again, as I just said, a part of having a Medicaid that it pays for private duty nursing hours. That's one of the best things one of the best things that's happened to us as a family is that while we're at work, right? Because I if you remember the episode with Dr. Bose, it is extremely challenging to work when you have a child who's differently able because of the appointments, because of the appointments, because of the treatments and the therapies and so on and so forth. Right? It's like even myself, I work, but I'm blessed. I'm thankful that my employers, my church, and my other job are flexible. Where I need to take off to take Maxwell to an appointment, I can do so. If I need to take Maxwell to therapies, I can do so. If a nurse calls out, I can stay at home. I'm going to do a whole episode on nursing and managing nurses and nursing kids. That's more than a notion. But again, Medicaid provides hours for nursing care so the parents can go to work, so the parent can, just go to the grocery store, do something for themselves, right? Again, because when you're a caregiver, it can be very tiring, it can be very taxing, and you do need help. And so, one of the things that Medicaid does is provide hours for those very things. Medicaid again provides assistance with getting medications. Lord knows, Lord knows, Lord knows these medications are astronomical in price. And so I have a primary insurance. And so what happens is the pharmacy, the pharmacist or whatever the company, they bill my primary insurance first. Then whatever the primary insurance does not pick up, the Medicaid, the secondary insurance picks up. Maxwell has some medications that are thousands of dollars. But again, thank God for the insurance. Thank God for Medicaid. Hospitalizations. Maxwell, unfortunately, he has surgery in October. Right now, he's looking at having another surgery in the coming months. With that being the case, surgeries are expensive. It's same thing. The primary picks up, then the secondary takes care of the rest. And so Medicaid is it's a lifesaver. It helps. One of the things about Medicaid, you have to apply, I believe, every year. You have to reapply to make sure that you can continue to benefit from those services. And so it's just not something you apply for once and you're on it for, until the child turns 18. No, you need to apply for it annually. And a good case manager who works for Medicaid should be able to help you with that, when to apply, and to walk you through that process. I think in Virginia, and I believe in Virginia, we didn't have that. And so they would send it in the mail. We have to fill it out. I remember one time it was late being submitted, and yeah, brother had to use the gift of gab to get it back resubmitted. And so it's a whole process. But again, when it comes to medical care coordination, having Medicaid, it's a must. Medicaid, it helps with everything. It just helps with everything. And so that's what I recommend. So hopefully, if you're watching this, hopefully this bless you. Hopefully that you can refer this to a family member, a friend, who you may know that has a child, and they're wondering, how do we, how do we get assistance? How do we get Medicaid? How do we offset some of these expenses? Well, I definitely go through a Medicaid. Look up your local Medicaid waiver in your state. Now, when Maxwell turns 18, there's going to be a different process. Maxwell's only 9 right now, so we haven't got to that point yet. We'll cross that bridge when we get there. But again, it's a whole process, and it's a blessing. And so again, hope you enjoyed this episode. Hope this episode was beneficial for you. If you haven't done so already, feel free to like us on Facebook at Our Story, Maxwell and Dad, or just Maxwell and Dad on Facebook. Same thing on Instagram, Maxwell and Dad, and on YouTube, Maxwell and Dad. Be sure to subscribe. And again, this is a blessing. Feel free to like, comment, and also feel free to share this episode with your network. Thanks for tuning in to Our Story, Maxwell and Dad. I'm Maxwell's dad.